is like the plan from A to Z, right? My my recommendation is the plan from A to B, right? From B to C, from C to D. Like plan from A to B, execute on A and B, right? Then plan for B and C, execute on B and C, plan for C and D, execute on C and D, and so on and so forth, right? Why do I recommend doing it that way, right? I recommend doing it that way just so you don't get stuck. So you can always have momentum and continue to go and continue to grow and to grow by experimenting, right? Grow by experimenting. And so what do I mean by grow by experimenting? I mean to again go from A to B, execute on A to B, plan for A and B, execute on A and B, let people like get feedback and then adjust as needed because based on the feedback that you receive from whoever your customer may be, your B to C may look different than what your plan actually says, right? What's up, fam? Before we get into today's episode, I want you to go check out our website at www.igotdreamspodcast.com and subscribe to our emailing list. We are creating the ultimate accountability group for entrepreneurs. So if you are an entrepreneur, if you are a business leader, if you are a dreamer, we want you to be a part of our group. All you got to do is go to www.igotdreamspodcast.com and subscribe to our emailing list, and we'll take it from there. This thing is going to be bigger than us, and we want you to be a part of it. Again, go to www.igotdreamspodcast.com and subscribe to our emailing list. Now, let's get back to the show. What's going on, fam? Welcome to another episode of the I Got Dreams podcast, the ultimate accountability podcast, where our goal is to take you from A to B, from idea to execution. Yo, this week has really been amazing to me, right? Because I've been getting feedback on my podcast, bro. And like, I appreciate everybody for tuning in, for listening, for saying, "Hey, Mike, like these are some things like that you can do better." Like I love the show, but it would be better if you just did this. And so the one comment that I got it like 3 times, which was amazing to me. And so it's like it's really an issue. Is they said, "Mike, hey, Mike, hey, like your content is great, but we need to hear you better, right? You need better sound quality, right?" And so I was like, yeah, man, I appreciate the feedback. I'm glad you tuning in. Hey, I'm going to work on the sound, right? And if you tune in to my lives on my personal pages on Facebook and Instagram, if you tune into my lives, you know that we're going and I go live every Tuesday at 7 a.m. If you tune into those lives, you know I'm covering the book The Lean Startup by Eric Ries, right? And the main theme in that book has been to create a minimal valuable product, get it out there, get feedback, and adjust along the way, right? You adjust according to that feedback. So that's exactly what I'm doing with this podcast. Like I've put out think this will be like seven or eight episodes, whichever one this is. So we put out a minimal valuable product enough where people can gauge and say like, okay, hey, I really like this. And so now they're comfortable with giving me feedback. And so I put the minimum valuable product out there. I'm getting feedback from customers, from listeners, and so now I am adjusting based on the feedback that I'm getting. So with that being said, hopefully this podcast sounds a lot better because I made some adjustments on my sound. Right, I didn't change my mic sound. Like my mic, changing my mic out is going to be it's going to be another step. It's going to be like another resort, and so what I did was I watched a couple of YouTube videos, try to figure out like how to actually change my sound and make it more professionally. But I decided to just do it on my own and change the little thing on my mixing box. I listened to it. It sounds good to me. So when I put it back out there, you know, I can get that feedback again. You know, they say, "Hey, Mike, that sound was way better like this week." And so once I say that, you know, once I hear that, you know, from my listeners, okay, okay, I'm on the right track, right? And so that's how you build a business, right? That is how you build a business. And so that's what this podcast is ultimately about. Again, accountability. My listeners were holding me accountable to my sound, and it needing to be better. And so and I took action based on that feedback. Because I'm gonna be honest, I thought the sound was okay. You know what I mean? I know it wasn't great, but I thought it was okay. But literally, somebody came up to me and just said, like, hey, I love the content, but I'm gonna be honest, like, your sound is trash. Like, that's literally what they said. And I appreciated it. I'm like, hey, man, I appreciate the feedback. Like, I love it. And I'm gonna do better and I'm gonna get better. So hopefully, this right here is better. And so, again, that's how you create a business, right? Like my listeners are my customers, right? I'm creating this content, I'm delivering this message for my listeners, right? And so if they come to me and tell me something that can make this podcast better for them, to make this experience better for them, I'm going to listen, take it into consideration, listen to their feedback, and then adjust, as I see fit, right? And so in this case, I decided to adjust my audio, and again, hopefully, this is better quality going forward when you listen to it, right? Hey, but I know I just jumped out there and said a lot. Again, you guys know I started off the podcast by asking, how was your week? So I already told you how my week was. Like, my week was great because I'm like, listeners are, man, I'm not even calling you guys listeners. Like, you guys are my family, and I appreciate you guys. So, I done had fams, like family, come up to me and, give me feedback on my podcast. And so I really appreciate that. So that made my week even better because one, I know you're listening. Two, you're giving me the feedback I need to get better as a podcaster, and as someone who's trying to deliver high quality content to you. So I appreciate that. But how was your week? How was your week? Like, write down in the comments and let me know how your week was, right? Or if you're watching this on YouTube, you're watching this on Facebook, or listening to this on Apple Podcasts, wherever you are, just let me know how your week was, right? What um what obstacles did you have to overcome this week, right? How far did you get in your into your business goals? So what did you accomplish to help move your business forward, right? So let me know in the comments, just or DM me. Just let me know how your week was. I will be. I always respond. I always respond. And I always give like my feedback, and I let you know how my week is going as well. So I really appreciate that interaction. So let me know how your week was, right? And so again, my week was great. I got a lot of feedback on the podcast, which I really appreciate. And again, we are here to grow, continue to grow, and learn together as entrepreneurs, right? And so the topic for today, right? So we've already covered having a vision. That was the first episode that we covered. We talked about setting goals, right? And so now for this episode, we're talking about creating an action plan, right? Creating an action plan. And so, why do you need to create an action plan, right? And let me go back. In episode one, in the vision episode, I really talked about planning and how you shouldn't get stuck in analysis paralysis, right? And so this is the point where people get stuck at, and they don't continue to move forward because they do so much research, right? They research from A to Z and don't really execute on anything. But the information that they only need is really maybe A to C, or A to D, or A to B even. You don't need much to actually just like go and start, right? And so the I want you to create this action plan, but I don't want you to get stuck while creating this action plan, right? Because the action plan is important, right? And so again, why do you need an action plan? For one, is that all of your questions will be answered, right? And so what I mean by all your questions will be answered. So all your questions will be answered because you have a guide to go by, right? So like we all have that question of like, okay, I got this idea. What do I do next, right? Creating an action plan will help you answer that question of what do I need to do next, right? And so it's basically is a guide to keep you on track to reaching your vision, right? An action plan is a guide to keep you on track to reaching your vision, right? And so we've set the goals already, right? Setting goals and creating an action plan are two totally different things, right? They are different, but they coincide with each other, right? Like we set the goals, but now we have to create an action plan to actually reach those goals, right? We set the goals, and now we have to create an action plan to reach those goals, right? And so, again, number one, as to why do you need to create an action plan, is that all of your questions will be answered. You have a guide to keep you on track to reaching your vision, right? So that was point number one. Point number two is that you'll know what needs to get done and when it needs to be done, right? So again, setting deadlines, right? So when you do this like with goal setting too in your goals. So when you set a deadline, like it keeps you on track, like this needs to be done by this time, right? And that is all laid out in your action plan. And we're gonna go over like how to actually create an action plan a little bit here in a second, right? So creating your when you create an action plan, you'll know what needs to get done and when it needs to be done, right? And so it helps you stay on track. Like an action plan helps you stay on track, right? And so that's point number two. So again, point number one is that all questions will be answered. Point number two is that you'll know when you'll know what needs to be done and when it needs to get done, right? And point number three is that you'll be aware of potential obstacles, right? So when you create this plan, this action plan, you also want to list out the potential obstacles that you may face while doing this task, right? And so again, that's all in the plan. So why do you need an action plan? Is one, all your questions will be answered. Two, you'll know what needs to be done and when it needs to get done. And three, you'll be aware of any potential obstacles, right? So there's a ton of value of creating an action plan, right? But those are the top three that I want you to focus on right now, right? And so right now you might be asking, okay, Mike, I get all that, but what, like, how to actually create this plan, right? I need to know how to actually create this plan, right? So there are six six sections in creating an action plan, right? That you need to know, right? The first the first session is a task, right? You need to know what task you're going to do, right? And so I'll give you an example, right? When me and my wife were creating our transportation company, and so there were certain tasks that we needed to get done, right? And so what we did was we wrote all the tasks down, and then this is point number two. In the second quadrant, you need to have like a person in charge who's going to complete that task, right? So one of the tasks that we needed to do was we needed to get a subscription on the DAT for the DAT load board, right? And so a DAT load board is just a load board where you find all the loads for a trucking company, and you can go on there, book it, all that good stuff, whatever. So we needed one of us to create that account for us in order to it was part of the process. So we needed to complete that task, and we had to assign somebody to complete that task. And so in that task, my wife, she was in charge of creating the DAT account for us, right? And so then this is the third point. We had to set a deadline, right? So when does that task needed to be done, right? So in this particular situation, we gave it 3 days, right? So this task needed to be completed within 3 days, right? And so again, the task is to create an account on a DAT load board, right? My wife was the person that's in charge of creating it. She had a deadline of 3 days to actually create the product. I mean, to create the account, right? And so, but when you're setting yours, right, give yourself an actual date, right? So give yourself a date. So if it's January 1st, right? Say I want to get this done by January 3rd, right? Or January 4th. Just make sure you have that concrete deadline so you don't miss it, right? And so next you have to identify the resources that's needed, right? And so again, our task is to create a DAT account for our transportation company, right? My wife was the person in charge for creating it. The deadline that she had was in 3 days. She had to create the account within 3 days, right? The resources that she needed was a credit card, right? She needed a credit card or a debit card to actually pay for the account, right? So we needed money to actually create an account. So when you are creating your list, right? Your action plan, make sure you put in the resources that you need in order to accomplish that task, right? So the resources that she needed was money. And so we used a credit card or a debit card to actually create that account. So she needed to make sure that she had that on hand, right? The fifth thing that you need in order to create an action plan is you need to know the potential obstacles, right? And we just told you that this is why creating an action plan is important, is because you can identify the potential obstacles, right? And so, what are some potential obstacles that we could have faced while creating this task, right? Or while doing this task, right? So, an obstacle could have been that um, we didn't have a business bank account, right? If we didn't have a business bank account, then we would have ran into an issue when it came to payment, right? Um, either well, just because we needed a business bank account, because here's what some people do, and which I don't recommend at all. Like it's definitely like a no in business, which is commingling, and that's like commingling your funds. So it's like if you have a personal account, you're mixing your money in your personal account with your business account money, right? So you never want to put money from your business account into your personal account. So you're commingling your money together. Like that's an absolute no, right? You want to separate the two. You have your personal over here, you have your business over here. Never commingle them at all. Period. So if we didn't have a business bank account, that would have caused us like time we would have lost time because we would have to went back to go back and then like create a business account, put money into it, and then go back and create this task, right? So that could have been a potential obstacle, right? For us actually creating this task. And so another potential obstacle is time, right? So at the time, like both my wife and I worked 9 to 5 jobs, right? And so let's just say she got busy doing work and kind of, forgot that hey, this was this needed to be done within 3 days, right? And so that could have been a potential obstacle, right? So how do we solve that issue? Hey, put it on the calendar. Like put it on the calendar that this task needs to be done in 3 days, and you get a reminder the day before the task is due, right? And so that helps you stay on track. But that's how you identify potential obstacles, right? And so we have, and like we'll have another episode to actually talk about um how to overcome potential obstacles, right? But that's how you identify them, right? And so again, that's that's number five. So number one was you have your task that you have to do, right? You have to. Number two is that you have to name the person who's in charge. Number three is that you have to have a deadline. Number four is you have to know what resources that are needed. Number five is to identify the potential obstacles. And number six is the result. So, what was the result of the task, right? Like, did you accomplish the thing that you set out to accomplish? Like in this case, was the account created? Was the DAT account created on time, or was it not? Like, that's a result. So, did it pass or did it fail, right? So, that's the last thing that you need is to know the result, and identify what it is. Like, did it pass? Did it fail? What do I need to do differently? Right. And so again, we have our task. Our task was to create a DAT account for our transportation company. Number two, we have the person in charge. In this case, my wife was the person in charge of completing this task. Three, we have the deadline. The deadline was set for 3 days. So she had 3 days to get this task done. 4, we identified the resources that we needed, which was money. So we had to have like a debit card or a credit card in order to pay for the subscription. 5 was to identify the potential obstacles, and we identified the obstacles, which could have been having a business bank account or time, and we figured we had ways to resolve those 2 obstacles, right? And 6, we had to name out what was the result. So did we actually accomplish the task on time, or did we fail? Did we not do it right? So though that's actually how you create an action plan, right? And so if you didn't get all that, like just mash the rewind button, and identify all 6, or just DM me and I actually send you a copy of the sheet that you need, like of the action plan, where you can actually just fill it out, and create your own action plan right there from the piece of paper, right? And so, what benefits what are the benefits of having an action plan, right? What are the benefits of having an action plan? A plan will keep you on course to reaching your dream, right? So if you have an action plan, it will keep you on course to reaching your dream. As I said previously, right? Once you have the action plan, it helps you to answer all the questions, right? It helps you to know what needs to be done and when it needs to be done, right? It helps you to know what are the next steps that you need to take, right? And so that is why having that's the main benefit of having an action plan. Dang, that was a lot of dates, but that's what are the benefits of having an action plan, right? So a plan will keep you on course to reaching your dream, right? And so that's what this whole podcast is about: is to give you tips, give you business tips to help you continue to reach your dreams and to do it in a proper way, right? And so I had some questions come in, like on social media, that asked about, like, okay, action plans and all that good stuff. So the first question is, how far out should I write my action plan? So how far out should I write my action plan, right? Again, some people like to plan from A to Z, right? My recommendation is to plan from A to B, right? From B to C, from C to D. Like, plan from A to B, execute on A and B, right? Then plan for B and C, execute on B and C, plan for C and D, execute on C and D, and so on and so forth, right? Why do I recommend doing it that way, right? I recommend doing it that way just so you don't get stuck. So you can always have momentum and continue to go and continue to grow, and to grow by experimenting, right? Grow by experimenting. And so what do I mean by grow by experimenting? I mean to, again, go from A to B, execute on A to B, plan for A and B, execute on A and B, let people like get feedback and then adjust as needed. Because based on the feedback that you receive from whoever your customer may be, your B to C may look different than what your plan actually says, right? And so according to my plan, my podcast plan, right? So creating a minimum valuable product. That was A, right? I put it out there, and I let people like listen to it and then give me their feedback, right? That was B. That's me planning from A to B. Now from B to C, I knew there was going to be like some level of upgrade that I needed to do. I knew that one of the upgrades I needed to do was my sound, right? And so that's actually the feedback that I was getting. So like from B to C, they said my sound needed to be better. So I said, okay. So I did A to B, which was create a minimal valuable product, put it out there. Now from B to C is to make sure I got better sound quality, right? And so I adjusted based on the feedback, but that was also according to my plan, right? Now, let's say I didn't know the sound was my issue. Let's say I thought it was the visual, right? So I thought I had planned for my B to C step to be my visuals, like changing my visuals, like adding more to my background, adding more to my background set, adding more like HD videos and all that good stuff. But if I would have had planned for that, I would have missed that. Okay, I need my sound to be better, and so that may be, instead of that being step B to C, that step might be C to D, right? But like based on the feedback that I got was about my sound, so I know my sound quality needed to be my B to C step, right? So according to the feedback, I changed it. But if I would have planned all the way from A to Z, I would have ignored that feedback, right? And so again, I recommend planning from A to B, from B to C, from C to D. And so again, plan from A to B, execute on A and B, plan for B and C, execute on B and C, plan for C and D, execute on C and D, and so on and so forth. Like doing it that way, in my opinion, would actually help you get farther along in your journey. Because let's say perhaps you actually do create your action plan from A to Z, right? You create it from A to Z, but you're putting a product out there that nobody really wants, right? That is the worst feeling, right? Like I spent all this time planning, researching, all the good stuff, and nobody wants what I put out, right? That sucks. Like that sucks, right? And so in order like to not do that, to not have that sucky feeling, is to actually put the minimum valuable product out there, the MVP out there. Let people give you their feedback on it, and you adjust based off your feedback. Because again, you're putting your product out there for your customers, right? It's not for yourself. It's for your customers. Your customer is going to tell you what they want. It's your job to give them what they want, right? So they might not want all the product from A to Z. They might just want product A to B, right? And then they say, okay, you need to do this better, and you take that feedback, and then you go from B to C, right? And so that's my recommendation. Feel free to do it how you would like, how you want, and let me know. Let me know actually like how you like to plan. Like let me know if you plan from A to B, execute on A to B. If you plan from B to C, execute on B to C, or if you plan all the way from A to Z and execute all the way to A to Z. Hey, I'm interested in knowing exactly how you plan, right? Again, my recommendation: plan from A to B, execute on A to B, plan from B to C, execute on B to C, so on and so forth. And so that was question number one. Question number two is, what happens if I don't get the results I was hoping for after completing the task? So if you don't get the result that you were hoping for, then just go back and repeat the task, right? But it's actually deeper than just going back and repeating the task, right? Because let's say one of your tasks was to get feedback from your customers, right? So, and you got that feedback from your customers, but based off that feedback, like it wasn't great feedback, right? And so, well, yeah, it wasn't great feedback. So now you're stuck. Like you've completed the task, but you didn't get the result that you wanted from the task, right? You were expecting people to say, "Oh, this is great. Like I love this. Like I would definitely use this." But that's not the feedback you were getting. You were wanting. Um, that's not the feedback that you got, right? That wasn't the result that you were looking for, right? And so now what you have to do is go back and analyze that feedback and actually like see if the if your customers had validity in what they were saying. And so like once you go back and look over their feedback and analyze it, and let's say it is like they do, like your customers do have a valid point, and so then you adjust your product as needed, and then go back and repeat that task. And so and then you may get the result that you were looking for, right? Again, I go back to me using the podcast as an example. Like I got feedback based on my minimal valuable product, which was like 5 or 6 episodes, and um, based on that feedback, I adjusted because I didn't get the result that I was wanting. So I adjusted based on the feedback, and so now I'm doing it again. I tweaked my audio. Excuse me. I tweaked my audio and made it better. So now I'm going to put this out. And if this is better, I'm going to go back and ask my listeners, my fam again. Say, hey, I changed my quality of my audio. Does it sound better? And if they say yes, okay, cool. We can move to the next step. If they say no, it still sounds like trash, then I need to go back and do something different, right? And then repeat. I need to repeat the same task again, right? So that's what happens if you don't get the results that you were hoping for in the test. Like, go back, analyze it, and then adjust as needed. Then try, um, redo the task, right? Question number 3: how do I identify potential obstacles? How do I identify potential obstacles? So here's one main thing, and we're actually gonna cover this now in our next session, um, in our next episode. But if you want to know how to identify potential obstacles, find a mentor. Like, that's really a cheat code, like in business, right? So find a mentor that has been through the same thing that you have, that you are going through, right? So before I started this podcast, right, I reached out to one of my mentors. His name is Dominique Lawson. Like, we've been homeboys for years, right? And so he has award-winning podcasts, right? Like, a lot of them. And so I look up to this man, like, especially when it comes to the podcast industry. Like, he's literally the podcast king, the podcast guru. So I knew I was going to reach out to him and ask him for help, right? I was going to run my idea by him, get his feedback, and based on his feedback, I was going to create my podcast based on what he told me and what he gave me, because he has been here before, right? He has overcame obstacles that I might be going through or that seem new to me. But if I know, if I bring it to him and say, hey man, like, my sound quality sucks, how can I make it better? He can instantly tell me how he did it, right? To help me get over that potential obstacle, right? And so that's what you need to do, like, in order to identify potential obstacles. That's one way of doing it, is to find a mentor who has already been down the road that you're going down, and ask them for their help, ask them for their advice. But again, we're going to cover that topic in the next episode, so stay tuned, y'all. But hey, again, this has been another dope episode. I appreciate y'all for tuning in. Hey, I love y'all. We're going to continue to grow as entrepreneurs. We're going to continue to grow as business leaders, and we are creating freedom and generational wealth for ourselves, for our family, and for generations to come. Again, this is Mike Davis, the host of the I Got Dreams podcast, the ultimate accountability podcast. I love y'all, fam. Have a great and beautiful day. Peace, fam. Thank you for listening to this episode. I know you just received a lot of value. So, look, here's what I want you to do now: go to our social media platforms on YouTube, on Facebook, on Instagram, on TikTok at I Got Dreams Podcast everywhere, and like, comment, subscribe to all those channels, and let's continue the conversation on there. Look, I told you before, we are creating the ultimate accountability group for entrepreneurs, and we want you to be a part of that group. So go ahead, like, comment, subscribe to our channels at I Got Dreams Podcast everywhere, and we'll see you there. Peace.